America has $100. Not anymore, you don't. Not because it vanished overnight, not because someone stole it in a headline scandal, but because, quietly, invisibly, the country has been spending more than it earns for decades. And now that gap has grown into something much bigger, something harder to ignore, a $2 trillion annual gap. That's the US budget deficit, the difference between what the government takes in and what it spends. And it's not a temporary glitch. It's becoming a habit, a very expensive habit. Think of the United States like a person going through a midlife crisis. Except instead of buying a sports car or joining a gym, Uncle Sam is running deficit spending on healthcare programs, defense budgets, and retirement checks for over 70 million people. And unlike a normal crisis, there's no reset button, no therapy session, no start over next Monday. Just the same cycle every year. Spend more leads to borrow more leads to repeat. That's how you end up here, a $38 trillion national debt. A number so large it stops feeling real and starts feeling abstract. But it isn't abstract. It's interest payments. It's borrowing costs. It's future taxes already spoken for. So the real question is simple. Is America's debt crisis inevitable, or is it just delayed? To understand that, you have to look at the system underneath everything, the federal budget structure. The US budget is not one big flexible pool. It's split into three parts. First, mandatory spending. Second, discretionary spending. Third, net interest payments. And here's where the pressure starts building. Mandatory spending is the giant that never sleeps. It includes programs like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, other entitlement programs. These are not optional. They are legal commitments. That means every year, regardless of politics or elections, the government must pay them. It's like financial gravity, always pulling down on the budget. Then you have discretionary spending. This is where politics lives. Defense, education, infrastructure, foreign aid. This is the part everyone argues about. But it's not the main driver anymore. Even if you cut everything here, you barely move the needle. And then comes the silent accelerator, net interest payments. This is what the US pays just to service its debt, not to reduce it, just to maintain it. And as rising interest rates increase borrowing costs, this category grows automatically. No vote required, no debate needed, just math. Here's the uncomfortable reality. Just a handful of programs dominate the entire system. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, defense, and interest payments together consume most of the federal budget outlays. Everything else is small compared to them. So when people talk about cutting waste, they're usually talking about pennies, not the actual problem. Let's start with the biggest driver of future pressure, Social Security. This program supports over 70 million Americans. For many retirees, it is not extra income. It is survival income. But here's the warning sign. The Social Security Trust Fund is projected to face insolvency around 2034. That doesn't mean payments stop. It means benefits would automatically be reduced by about 20% because payroll tax revenue alone won't be enough. No political decision required. Just financial reality kicking in. Then there's Medicare. Over 65 million Americans depend on it for healthcare coverage, but healthcare costs are rising faster than revenue. The Medicare trust system is also heading toward insolvency in the early 2030s. That creates a brutal equation. More elderly population, higher healthcare demand, limited funding base, equals structural deficit pressure, and even small policy changes like raising Medicare payroll taxes become politically explosive. Medicaid adds another layer. It supports low-income families, disabled individuals, and elderly care costs. But unlike the other programs, Medicaid isn't funded by a trust fund. It runs through federal-state cost sharing. That sounds flexible until you realize inefficiency leaks billions annually through improper payments, eligibility errors, fraud, and waste. It's not the biggest driver of the crisis, but it is part of the slow bleed in the system. Now, zoom out. Add defense spending around $850 billion annually. Add mandatory healthcare programs. Add Social Security. Add interest payments. You start to see the pattern. The US isn't just spending a lot. It's structurally locked into spending a lot. This is what economists call a structural deficit. Not a mistake, not a cycle and a design feature. And here's where the US fiscal crisis becomes harder to ignore. When spending consistently exceeds revenue, the government must borrow. That's how you get debt accumulation. And when debt grows faster than the economy, concerns about debt sustainability begin to rise. Investors notice, markets react, and borrowing becomes more expensive. That's when the interest burden starts compounding the problem. Higher interest rates don't just affect government budgets, they spread everywhere. Mortgages become more expensive, business loans slow down, credit tightens, economic growth slows. This is how fiscal issues turn into economic issues, quietly, then suddenly. So why not just fix it? Because every solution is politically painful. You have three main options: cut spending, raise taxes, or restructure entitlements. Each one triggers resistance. That's where political gridlock enters the picture. Congressional decision-making is slow, divided, and sensitive to voter backlash. And voters don't like losing benefits or paying higher taxes. So reforms stall and deficits continue. Meanwhile, the demographic clock keeps ticking. An aging population means more retirees and fewer workers supporting them. That ratio matters more than most people realize. Fewer workers leads to less payroll tax revenue. More retirees leads to higher benefit payouts. This imbalance quietly worsens the system every year. And then there's inflation and interest rates. When borrowing costs rise, everything tightens. That creates financial tightening across the economy. Debt becomes more expensive. Budget flexibility shrinks. Policy options narrow. It's like the system is slowly losing oxygen. So where does this end? There are three possible paths. Path 1, controlled reform. Spending adjustments, tax reform, entitlement changes. Painful, but stable. Path 2, slow deterioration. Continued borrowing, rising interest burden, gradual erosion of fiscal space. This is the most likely path if nothing changes. Path 3, crisis adjustment. A forced correction triggered by markets, not policymakers. This is the most disruptive version. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The system doesn't feel broken in real time. It feels manageable, right up until it doesn't, because deficits are not experienced daily. They accumulate quietly, like pressure in a sealed container. And that's the core contradiction. On paper, the US still looks powerful. Stable GDP, active economy, global influence. But underneath, the revenue versus expenditure gap keeps widening. And that gap is the real story. So is America's debt crisis inevitable? Not mathematically, but structurally, it's already in motion. The only variable left is timing. How long can a system keep borrowing from the future before the future demands repayment? And maybe the real question isn't whether a crisis is coming. It's whether gradual adjustment is still possible before adjustment becomes forced. Because at some point, delaying the decision doesn't avoid the outcome. It just makes it more expensive. And if you like this kind of content, do us a favor, like the video and subscribe.